of owning a cafe and other heroic deeds by Beware the Tistero. Chapter 80. Contentment. Spinner had thought that he'd enjoyed coming to All Might Land by himself. However, as Dobby complimented his route through the park and Tomra smiled at him, he found that the jaunts he'd taken here as a single rider couldn't compare to the camaraderie of having friends. Because he had friends now. Just like his ma and pa had always told him that he would. He didn't look at himself in the mirror and curse what he saw anymore. He didn't take what the bastards at his high school sneered at him to heart, either. In fact, now, when someone huffed at him and called him a loser, a quiet voice that sounded like Cat Dad told him that he'd be at the Noraneko soon, that the cafe community, who valued him, who liked him, were waiting just at the end of that final 1600 bell. When someone criticized his quirk, his mind summoned up an image of Midoriya Izuku, those emerald eyes glimmering as the top told him how cool he was. "You'd make an amazing firefighter, Spinner-ni! Oh, well, if you, Dobby-ni, and Tomu-ni don't make a video game company together, you know?" He'd even felt confident enough to bring that career choice up with his guidance counselor. He'd expected her to laugh. He thought that she'd snort incredulously and send him out of her office. "Iguchi-kun, I think that's an excellent idea. You've certainly got the academic grades for it, and your gym teacher has written a glowing report for you this semester. If you like, I can approach the Musutafa Fire Department to see what extracurricular courses are available. Why, you'll be 17 after the summer break, won't you? That'll mean that you'll be eligible to enter their initial training program." He'd been blown away by the opportunity, and after telling the other teens, his friends, about what she'd told him, they'd been elated for him. "You'll have to start training more often with Show and the Smalls. We're gonna start upping our game too, so we can help you get ready if you want to try it, you know?" He could even count a pro hero in the making as a friend now, couldn't he? For although he'd been initially quiet, as the lovebirds had chatted together as they walked from ride to ride, he and Naoki had struck up a few conversations themselves. Just like him, the bark-quirked kid had it rough. They'd laughed together about the idiots who dissed them. They'd shared tips and tactics to avoid conflicts with such morons, and the four of them now making their way to the lush, grassy, garden-like area at the center of All Might Land for lunch. The slightly older teen had swapped numbers and game station IDs with him so that he could take part in the League of Cafe tournaments without having to be inside the Noraneko itself. Things were really looking up for Spinner, weren't they? As 1400 rolled around, Shouta had been on 5 fantastic, thrilling, and fast roller coasters with Toshinori at his side, the pair of them having fit together thanks to the, admittedly, amazing engineering detail built into every car for each ride. The seats, he'd watched the mechanisms in action, adjusted in width and height to accommodate all shapes and sizes of people. He'd never seen such a thing. However, when the older man's stomach loudly rumbled, he chuckled, nudged him in the ribs, and nodded toward the picnic area. "Something tells me it's muffin time," he'd said, the other blushing and rubbing the back of his neck as he tried to laugh it off. The poor guy couldn't hide the look of longing on his handsome face, though, and so he'd stopped the teasing and walked with him down one of the brightly colored brick paths, arched by lush greenery. They'd held hands, too. "Shoni! Hi!" Meeting the tots, Koji, Mitsuki, and Inko, the latter two looking so happy and giggling like schoolgirls en route, Shouta had scooped Hitoshi up into his arms and hugged him tight whilst the other kids all scampered and clambered around him. "We've been on so many rides, Shoni," the 7-year-old told him enthusiastically as they all resumed their walk towards the area they'd be eating in, Toshinori's chuckling form now coated with children. "The Big Dipper was my favorite, though." Katsuki and Ejiro were balanced on his shoulders, while Tsuyu and Izuku were cradled in his arms. Dengi, however, was enjoying a piggyback thanks to his father, both cackling and cracking jokes as they went. "God! Me and Tsuyu went on it 3 times in a row!" He was glad. The electric quirk user had told him a couple of times how he longed to be with the man more often. Being an adult today was hard enough, but when it came to raising a family and spending quality time together, well... And then Izu challenged Ocho to a silly face challenge on the wagon wheelies, and he smushed his cheeks up like a hamster. It must be hard. He'd only had the wonderful Irish-haired boy so animatedly telling him all about his adventures for a couple of months, and he felt guilty about not potentially getting to spend the kind of quality time with him that he'd need to grow and be happy.
He's let me have a copy of it too, so I'm gonna put it in Mom's memory book.
He couldn't imagine what it must be like for people who didn't own their business and had to travel, play by their boss's rules, and meet strict deadlines for fear of becoming unemployed.
I'm having the best time, but I can't wait to eat either. All of this excitement has made me really hungry, Nissan.
Blinking back to the present, his ward settled more calmly against him, that mop of unruly hair resting upon his shoulder. Shouta let out a contented little sigh whilst gently readjusting his hold of the boy, who yawned a little and curled into him more.
Let's get you fed then,
The rest of their afternoon had been delightful. Aw, look at them! I took her down! They're so cute! He'd eaten the food he'd packed for them, guzzled down lemonade, taken a ridiculous amount of photos, and then hit the less vigorous rides. Hey, you know, I always wanted younger siblings. It's pretty cool to get to spend time with these guys, isn't it? Katsuki and Eijiro had spun their basin in the ramen bowl ride at top speed. His care center siblings had shown them all their favorite water rides, and then they'd gone on to Stars and Stripes Town to try their hands at winning prizes of the plush, stuffed, and fuzzy variety.
They sure are heavy though.
Thanks to the local pros, his care center siblings and Toshinori, every child, plus themselves, had gotten some form of brightly colored mascot, clothing item, and action figure to take home with them.
You think these guys are heavy? Bah! You should try looking around for kids, as only.
Katsuki and Izuku had matching All Might soft dolls that were as big as they were. Eijiro had a huge great white shark that the crimson-eyed blonde had won for him. Adorable. Ochako and Tsuyu had matching sets of Tsunaitai and Fatgum plushies, whilst Denki and Titoji, both getting manly, had managed to score the American hero Static Shock plush figures too. No way, dude! You want to carry all of your little brothers at one time? That's insane! And now, Oboro very kindly creating a nimbus to carry the cuddly presents, novelty items, and clothing, they were heading home.
Yes, well, I did have a little red wagon with me, luckily. You boys used to run yourselves ragged at the beach, didn't you? I'll never forget Seiji and Naoki demanding that I carry them and not you.
He chuckled, he and his friends carrying the out-of-buff children. Denki was snoring already, towards the minibus and cars they'd all arrived in. Toshinori held Katsuki and Eijiro. He had Itoshi set happily across his shoulders. Takeo carried Izuku in a koala carry. Namori was cuddling Tsuyu. Hisashi cradled Ochako, and Denki was drooling into his grinning father's shoulder. Well, we were the youngest, the pro hero in training defended, as Spinner ribbed him, and he somehow blushed despite his wooden skin. And besides, you have us to thank for that almost inhuman strength of yours, right? Lifting weights can't compare to wrestling with your brothers, can it? All sharing a laugh, Dabi moving to tousle his hair before snagging a madly grinning Itoshi. Shouta said his goodbyes to the people heading straight home, and in an incredibly daring move that had some people, Nomori, Mitsuki, and Inko mainly squealing, and others balking, did he hear his teens grunt out, "Bulldogs!" He kissed Toshinori farewell.
Shouta-kun!
On the lips!
I'll see you for your regular muffin pickup on Monday, right? Yes! Yes, definitely!
Then the kids loaded into the minibus, or Mitsuki's car. He'd accepted a kiss on the cheek from Mitsuki, waved goodbye to the pros, and he laugh-snorted when Oboro blew him a kiss. "See you tomorrow night, Sho-chan."
See you then,"
he responded, and if he wasn't mistaken, Tomoko and Nomori had tittered to Toshinori, coughing lightly into his hand. That smiled strange. He knew that the other wasn't jealous, but something told him that the man was very much looking forward to the following Sunday, and if he was perfectly honest, nice! So was he. Getting home, he'd whisked Izuku and Hitoshi upstairs to finish their naps and welcomed Inko to stay. Kamanari Koji, the minibus needing to be returned to his place of work, had promised to stop by every other week over the summer with Denki before he'd driven off to drop Ochako and Tsuyu home too. Then, the rest of the afternoon bleeding into the evening, without any customers. It was strange, but he wouldn't trade in this family time for anything. He made a slap-up meal for all of them to enjoy before they'd bid Inko good night. He'd insisted that Spinner stay. He was just as much a family member by now, and his father, elated, was more than happy for him to sleep over, too. Izuku, of course, had stayed for the living room camp out, all of them dressed in their pajamas, sharing snacks and yucking it up as though they'd known each other forever. And then some kind of Western movie playing across the TV, he'd sat on his futon and surveyed the young men he loved. Izuku and Hitoshi were snuggled together on his ward's futon, both of them reading a set of manga he'd seen Nomori gift the iris-haired child before they left the park, their lips quietly muttering to each other. He made a note in his mind to thank her for her kindness tomorrow when she attended her self-defense lesson. Naoki and Spinner, and there was a kinship there. God, he was glad for it. Were conspiring with Dabi and Tomura, the younger awesome foursome, no doubt cooking up some plan or other to best the middle and high schoolers who'd challenged the League of Cafe to gaming matches over the summer. It was an adorable name, not that he'd say so for fear of making it less cool. Seiji, his cheeks pinked, was no doubt texting Isashi. Aww! Alongside Tadeo, who may or may not have asked him for tips after he went out with Oboro tomorrow. Those golden eyes soft as they looked at his phone. Takeo, however, was sat next to him, his hands shoveling katsu-flavored rice crackers into his chomping maw as he grinned, nudged him, and commented about the movie they were all supposed to be watching. Getting some quality time with a boisterous young man was always something he'd relish. Out of all his care center siblings, he'd been least worried about him, due to his vivacious attitude, iron will, and positive outlook, and although he'd only talked about a certain young woman he'd met in Kyoto a couple of times, he was sure that there was something more developing there. God, to see them all happy, to see them all thriving. You mind if I share your futon, Aizawa? He couldn't be more grateful.
Of course I don't mind, Takeo-kun.
As was always the case with him, Sunday hit him pretty early. Stifling a yawn, his eyes looked to his phone. 4:47. Oh, that was a little earlier than usual for him, wasn't it? He'd sat up and, as always, checked on his precious people before making a move. Everyone was fine, their bodies snoozing, snoring, and in Seiji's case, quietly sleep-muttering away. So cute! Then a quick shower and change of clothes in his bedroom. He'd been greeted by Izuku, Hitoshi, and Takeo, similarly up, all of them quietly insisting that they wanted to join him for his run. And so, as he jogged down the back stairs to check on the cats, all of them well, hungry, thirsty, and pleased to be free of their crates, with the exception of Raijin, who, like the boy who'd picked him, and yawned and tried to snuggle back into his bedding. He'd petted them all and watched them scurry into their enclosure for another day of fun. Chuckling to himself as he'd left the cat maintenance room without preamble, he'd smiled at the younger males, all dressed in their shorts, t-shirts, and sneakers, as Takeo diligently disabled the alarm and followed them out of the door, which he'd locked behind him. Dabi, Tomura, and Takeo all had keys if they needed to get out, and even though he'd seen the area he'd adopted change for the better, he didn't believe in taking risky chances, and it was always better to be safe than sorry, which meant, of course, that he'd ensure his CCTV was running and doing everything in his power to keep the young people in his cafe safe, well, and content. Wow, you kids are pretty fast, huh? It had taken them 5 laps of a pretty intense pace before the 7-year-olds, both so amazing in their own ways, had given in, their smiles weary and juggles light, but upon reflection,
if I could have kept that kind of pace going at your age, I probably would have been a track and field star in high school, you know?
He praised them, him and his second oldest sibling ruffling the boy's hair, all 4 of them laughing and chatting as they walked back to the cafe at a more sedate pace. Hey, well, that run has got me so pumped for our match later. The brunette grinned as they approached the stray cat's main entrance, his eyes rolling fondly.
I'm looking forward to it, too,
he replied through a snigger.
And should you manage to knock me on my ass, then yes, I'll finally concede my place at the top of our family ranking and call you Shisho. How's that?
He'd offered the golden eyes, which had met his simmering with challenge. Oh yeah! Takeo called, his hand slightly lowered for high fives with the dots. I'm gonna have you call me that all of the time and have you recorded for posterity too. Hawks, he was not permitted his own name, hadn't left the facility in a good 5 years or so. We're going to a cafe? Why? Sure, he wasn't opposed to leaving. However, he found the whole thing odd.
You're being assigned your first mission of sorts, Hawks.
His handler replied as they walked down one of the many stark maze-like corridors.
You and twice are going to meet with some potential recruits today, and should the answers I expect to receive to my offers be negative, you'll have the further goal of gaining trusted reconnaissance. Do you understand?
Blinking, his wings fluffing up at the prospect of finally getting to apply everything he'd been learning, Hawks smiled brightly. Sir, yes, sir, he replied with a polite incline of his head. You can count on me.